safety is our number one priority. And that is exactly what I'm here to remind you about. I'm also here to remind you of a very important element, that it's not only that you are responsible for safety in this organization, but you have the right to stand up for safety. I must remind you that as leaders in this organization, this is a message you must not just understand, but be able to cascade to each one of your team members as you go forward. Ladies and gentlemen, please note that at the end of this briefing, we have scheduled for a couple of minutes for questions that we'll field from the team here. Please feel free to make a note of any questions that you have through the briefing, so you can then present those questions to me at the end. I'd like to start today with presenting you with a small formula, and the formula is called PRIME. In the dictionary, the meaning of the word prime is of utmost importance. And to us, safety is the most important element. I'd like to remind you that safety is our priority. That it is not just your responsibility, but your complete right to speak up on safety, to take care of not just your own safety, but also safety of people who work with you. It is your right and your responsibility. And if you're present, and if you see it, then don't think of it as somebody else's responsibility. Remember, it's your responsibility. Safety cannot be externalized. Internalize it, because you are the one responsible. And let me assure you, there's nothing called a minimum safety threshold. Because if there was anything called a minimum safety threshold, then it meant that 80% safe was okay. Then it meant that if you were 10 people that came to work every morning, in the morning you'd have to decide which 2 of you are not going home today. Therefore, remember PRIME as we start this conversation around the incident that you're all aware of. The incident that happened on our Pacific East rig called the Yellow Tempest. All of you remember that we managed to kill one of our employees on that rig in June this year. Many things went in to causing that death, but you must remember that we are responsible for that individual's death. There were 4 elements that went into this incident. A forklift with its fork raised up without a driver. A half-a-ton pipe in the vicinity. An extremely well-trained hand at maintenance, James Oswald, and extremely safety-protected, safety-certified equipment, a grinding machine. When Lewis Gordon walked on the Tempest that morning, what he saw seemed incorrect. It seemed extremely wrong. He walked up and he realized that James out there, the maintenance guy, had a half-a-ton pipe resting on top of the forklift with no driver. The way he was grinding away at it seemed very, very close to near accident situation, because he stood right under that pipe. Lewis immediately knew that this weight will deteriorate the hydraulics of the system, and that pipe can cause an injury. He looked at a partner of James who stood close by watching, and he went up to him and in all this noise shouted, "Man, ask him to stop, it's dangerous." The guy standing there shooed Lewis away and said, "He's a smart guy, he knows exactly what to do." Lewis persisted. He said, listen, that is extremely unsafe. You have to ask him to stop. Lewis was pushed, shoved, and asked to buzz off because he wasn't a supervisor of that area. Lewis continued walking away and left. But when he returned to the situation a short while later, he realized something had changed. Number one, it had gotten much quieter. The pipe was not on the forklift. As he looked, it lay down on the ground with James right next to it, his limp body lying in between two medics who weren't doing anything and a colleague who was no more shouting but sobbing like a little child. Two decisions, ladies and gentlemen, led to this fatality. Decision number one, the watchkeeper's decision to shoo Lewis away. Decision number two, Lewis's decision to not persist and walk away. You must remember, you have the right and you have the responsibility. Remembering this incident, I'd like to present you those 2 minutes for any questions that you might have. I would like to respond and share any feedback that you want about what happened on this incident or things that we must watch out for. I encourage you to ask me any questions that you think would be appropriate for this session. Stuart, please.
Yeah, you talked about the supervisor. Is he not always in control? Is he not always the one who should be taking responsibility? And why and how did he not take control of the situation? Can you please explain?
He did take control of the situation, except he took the wrong control of the situation. Lewis wasn't the supervisor. Lewis was just the person passing by. And like us, all of us have these opportunities, right? We're passing by, we see, but we choose not to do anything about it. So neither of these people were supervisors. They were all working. He had a partner who was watching over him, but his partner didn't know better. I think it's called complacency. We've done it before. We can do it again. It was wrong once, won't go wrong again. Yeah.
Then Louis, what could he have done better in order to avoid it?
Known his rights. And I think all of us understand that. If you know your rights, you know clearly that you have the responsibility in this company. It doesn't matter what level you're at, what level you're speaking with. If it's about safety, you have the right to say stop. You have the right to put that person, put his hand away from you, walk up to the other individual and say stop. Evaluate that situation, and then if it was right to do it, let him continue. If it was wrong, believe me, he'd be very aware of it himself and stop. I don't think there's anybody who comes to the company with the intention of dying and not going home, So they will take that first step for sure.
Did he have the work permit to carry out the work on the forklift?
Good question. Through the investigations, it was found that the work permits weren't appropriate. This was an off-the-cuff work that had come up, which was just grazing the surface of a half-ton pipe, which needed to be then placed into, welded into place. It was not a planned activity. It was part of a larger scope and was being covered under the work permit that was being talked about. So no, it wasn't the appropriate work permit either. But let me ask you this. If you were in Lewis's place, what are some steps that you would have taken? Do you see yourselves being responsible?
If he is not following, we need to report immediately to the HSC. This is what our
Yes.
culture says having the region.
Safety for in the oil and gas.
If he is not following us, definitely he might not follow us since I am not the supervisor or
Correct.
not related to HSC. Immediately, what we can do is to report HSC
Agreed.
at the earliest.
Agreed.
Apart from reporting, what we have in the company which we should introduce is anybody can stop the work. I mean, if it is a safety hazard, you don't have to be a supervisor. Anybody can stop the work if it is a safety hazard, because by the time if you go to the HSC, this accident would have, it can occur. So everyone has a right to stop the work if it is a safety hazard. I mean, that is the culture we should, bring in.
At our organization, we have this culture. If it's all right with you, I'd like to summarize and close. But the culture that we're talking about is that if you see it and you think it is wrong, it doesn't matter if you know it's wrong or not, If you think it's wrong, it is your responsibility to stand there and stop the job. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, remember, lots of things can happen. The family has waited for him. His child is probably crying, "Father." However, neither of them know that's not going to happen. What you should always remember is who's watching out for him. My recommendation, remember Prime. That's the best way for you to at least start to understand your responsibility towards safety. That was one.